people are here. I don't see them listed at the bottom though. Yeah, okay. They're still filling up, so we're going to wait a second while they all fill up in from the waiting room. So one moment. Okay. So welcome. I'm Robert Rosenberg. I'm a filmmaker and a film programmer, and I work with Outsider Pictures, the distributor of AVIVA, the film we're going to talk about today. If you want to find out more about the film, you should go to outsiderpictures.us, and our social media handle is @outsiderpictures. And just a reminder, for small films like this, the audience is the best promoters we have. If you've seen the film and you love it, tell your friends. They can still go to that page and click through to the art house of their choice around the country and buy what we call a virtual ticket, which is an online streaming pass that benefits the theaters, which are closed, as well as goes back to the film itself. It's a world premiere online. It's what we call virtual cinema. It's something new in this time of COVID-19, and we're excited to be able to do this. We're going to talk for, I'm sorry, my cats are running around in the background, probably making noise here. And we're going to talk for about 15 minutes with the director and the actors who are here with us today, and then open it up to questions. But you can also send us your questions through the Q&A box. There's a little link at the bottom, not the chat box. And when we're done with that, we'll go to the questions, and you can also send us questions when we get to that point as well. We'll try to avoid spoilers, though this isn't a film full of spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen the film, but we won't assume that you've seen it quite yet, though I'm sure a lot of you have. So a big welcome to the director of AVIVA, Boaz Yakin, over here. He's with us from New York. And then to actor and principal choreographer for the film, Bobbi Jean Smith, who's with us from Vermont, yes, with actor and co-choreographer Schraiber together. So welcome everybody. We're going to try to ask some different questions, like I said, so if they're a little bit loopy, I sort of thought of them in the shower before, trying to come up with some new ideas. But actually, this is a question I had from one of the Q&As we did last weekend. Why did you choose a palindrome, a word that can be read forward and backwards, as the name of the main character and the title of the film? There must be a reason.
Well, it's interesting. It was sort of by default. The original title for the movie, I originally called the main character in the film Alexa because I wanted her name to be the same as the camera. I wanted the main character basically to have a relationship with the camera and with a woman as well. But then everyone was telling me, everyone's going to think it's about Amazon Alexa, which I didn't even really know about. And I had to backtrack. And I came up with AVIVA because it's palindromic, and it actually suddenly dawned on me it's a much better name.
Does it mean something symbolically for the story or for the character in your mind? No, okay. Well, you mentioned that's a palindrome a few times. I'll come back to that in a second, but I want to go to Bobbi and Bobbi, both of you are really coming from dance backgrounds as opposed to acting backgrounds entering this film. And both of you, and especially I know Bobbi, spent many years in the well-known Israeli company Batsheva. I'm wondering, what did you bring from your experience in Batsheva in terms of style and choreographic vocabulary and grammar to the work you did as choreographers and dancers, particularly in this film?
In Batsheva, we study Gaga, and the daily practice is Gaga, and it's something we start our days with, and it seeps through into almost every part of your life. And I feel very fortunate that it is part of my DNA and part of the language that I speak, and my work is deeply influenced, and it derives from that place. It's where I came from, and I'm very proud of the similarities that my work has to Batsheva and that whole world, the dancers, Ohad, everything about that place. And so, of course, there are similarities, and I hope also new things that I'm finding the further away I am from the tree.
And or what about you as a dancer? I think this is your first significant role as an actor in a film. How was that for you?
So like Bobby, I'm coming also from the Bacheva Dance Company, and I feel like because I was there since the age of 18 to 24, something like that, those were the shaping years of my life in terms of artistically, and using all the tools that Bobby just talked about, Gaga, with the choreography of Ohad Naharin, it's inevitable for, it's ingrained in our system, in our DNA as creators, as auteurs, you know what I mean? And I think that it was, the acting part was a different path for me, and Boaz was very involved in, but from the dancing aspect, it was an interesting dive into something that we haven't done before, dance on camera, in a bigger scale, so to speak. You know what I mean? Not a run and gun show.
But one of the things that's interesting about the way Bobbi and Or work, I mean, comes from, like they're saying, Gaga, but I think it's also something that Bobbi really brings to it from her own self, is that it's a very internal style of dancing that starts from the emotion, that starts from the inside and works its way out, as opposed to movement that kind of comes from the outside and works its way in. So even though these guys didn't have necessarily so much experience, or some cases any experience at all in acting, because the way they perform is such an emotionally based and a truth-based kind of technique, it enabled them to connect into the film as or in the movie as actors, a little rough around the edges sometimes, not polished the way people who have acted in 20, 30 things act, but there's an honesty, and I think that's the most important thing about the movie, because the filmmaking, the storytelling, everything about it was meant to be free-flowing and not particularly structured, and very, very much that you see the seams, that you see the thing being put together. I think that the way Bobbi and Or work, and Zena, who was with them, who plays Aviva, who was with them at Batsheva, it's such an internal way of approaching movement that they were able to translate that into their performances. And I think the rawness and the honesty of the emotions are there for them as actors as well.
So Boaz, this film, I know you kind of resisted this idea, but it's really kind of a break, a change from almost, or it's different from any other film you've ever made, let's say that, and maybe different from any other film ever made in some ways. How did you decide, why did you decide to make the film this way, and where did you get the idea to marry the language of contemporary dance, which fills up large parts of the film, with actually telling a romantic, dramatic story?
Well, it's true that in terms of when the films that you see that I've made, it's pretty divergent from those things. Although I have done some independent films that have explored, whether it's Death and Love or Boarding School, whether I've gone into some other areas, but I've been trying to do something more free and more open for a while. And I got this idea because I had been wanting to explore the idea of the imbalance between the masculine and feminine in the self by having two actors play the lead character, a man and a woman.
You're giving that away. You're giving that away. I'm just,
that's the basis of the whole film. And I'd been wanting to explore that for a while, and I didn't really find a way in. And I had been wanting to make a film that had dance and movement in it. It's part of my background. My parents are pantomimes and movement teachers, and I've never really used that in a film. And I was talking to an old dancer friend of mine and telling him I had these two different ideas. And he was like, why don't you make that the dance movie? And a light bulb just went off, and it was like a big door opened for me. And once that door opened, especially since I knew I was going to be making the movie with my own funding, basically, and I didn't have to answer to any financer or anything like that, every once in a while, as a creative person, you really just have to say, fuck it. And I think, and I'm just going to try anything and everything and fuck it, right? And a lot of times when you're a filmmaker or a writer, like those things basically are things that you write and that nobody does, and they sit on your shelf. And I had an opportunity to actually make something like that now. That's the kind of thing that Bobbi and Or do when they're doing choreography all the time, and that contemporary dance does all the time, and people in the arts and like in painting and do, frankly, because there's less money involved. There's such a straitjacket on filmmakers who want to do anything remotely narrative, especially in our country, because of the money involved. Because even low budget films are a lot of freaking money. In this one, I was just like, I'm just going to do everything that comes to my mind and enjoy it. And as long as it's expressive and something that I feel can be enjoyed and connected to by somebody, I'm going to try it. Who cares if it works or if it doesn't work, you know? And that's how I approach the movie, which is of course different than so many of the other things I've done, because I've had to answer to other people on the other things I've done.
So that leads me, Or and Bobbi, to talk about the whole idea that you guys were playing the doppelganger or the double of the main characters, the Aviva and Eden, or you're playing the male aspect of the female character Aviva, and Bobbi, you're playing the female aspect of Eden. Now, if you haven't seen the film, that might be a little bit confusing, but I know I asked you something last time that I was curious about again. How did you work with the other actor? Did you try to imagine that you had similar gestures, or you just ignored any connection? What was the interplay between each other when you were on screen together sometimes and not always?
Yeah, I think luckily we both had very intimate friendships with the people that we were sharing the part with. So Tyler and I, we met each other in Sleep No More, and we became close friends. And Or and Jene had danced together in Batsheva for
6 years.
6 years. So there was very like organic comfort between us that it felt like the conversations felt very easy and flowing and challenging. And I think, yeah. That's what made it, you know, mostly a lot of observing each other, watching each other in other scenes, talking about why you made these decisions, asking them how they would react in a situation maybe that we're present, and letting it just be a constant conversation of how to push each other and question each other and support each other also.
Yeah, I think, and that's a spoiler alert, even, you know, it's not actually because it's all over the magazines, but the sex scenes were so organically, you know, feeling so comfortable, obviously because of the atmosphere the Boaz and the crew, the small crew created, but also the fact that it was Tyler and Jene. It was
like family.
It was family, yeah. It was like the moment after the sex scenes, like different conversation, like it happened, you know. It wasn't something out of the blue.
And you know, one thing I really encouraged Or and Bobbi and Jene and Tyler, like, you don't have to tie your performances into each other. You're playing the same person, but you're a completely different side of that person. You don't have to like imitate each other's gestures. Just be honest about who you are and what you're feeling in the scene. It's a very theatrical concept. It's not meant to be, you know. So I think that they did work with each other to find emotional connections and all that. But in terms of trying to like mirror each other or anything like that, that was never part of the concept.
Yeah, even looking back, I think sometimes we'd want to do it even more than you, like at times like, hey Boaz, what if I'm wearing a similar color to Tyler when he did this? And you're like, no, we don't need that. Yeah. Like it's strong at the core. That we don't need a lot of those details to try and make it clear.
Right.
So Boaz, was the script, to what extent was it inspired by real moments in your life? People always ask that. And also, is the script that you wrote the script that we see on the screen to a large extent?
Well, considering how much music and dance and kind of physicalization of the idea, I've never written a script that I felt was more, I mean, every script is a blueprint for the movie or the television show or whatever it is. It's a blueprint. But this was more than anything I've done that way. So, I mean, the script is followed very closely, actually. I mean, it is the script, but the physicalization that Bobbi and Or brought to it, the choreography. I mean, there's like 13, 14 dance numbers in this film, or pieces or movement pieces or whatever you want to call them. The movie is hugely organically connected to what they did once it was being made. So the script served as the inspiration and the jumping off point for what you see. But I've never made a movie where so much of it was really conceived and kind of explored on the spot while we were doing it, which is something I wanted to explore. I mean, so many films that you do, again, when you're responsible to other people, it's like you storyboard everything, you shot list everything, you make sure that like your original vision is how you're trying to carry out the rest of the movie. This movie was like, I want to discover this movie while we're making it. That's what I wanted to do. And you know, there were a few shots I knew I wanted, like, oh, a wide shot, Central Park, whatever, but it's like 4 or 5 shots. The whole rest of the movie was like, we'd get there and I'd have an idea of how I wanted to shoot something, but I had to work organically with what Bobbi and Or and everybody else was doing. And that was the fun of the movie for me. And I'm proud of the fact that the movie sort of hangs together, but at the same time feels like it's an act of creation that you're watching while you're watching it. It has a very, you know, kind of lively and organic feeling, similar to how you feel when you're watching theater and you realize that that's the only time you're ever going to see that particular expression that you're watching right now. AVIVA obviously isn't live theater, but I feel it does capture the spontaneity of that because of the way we work together.
Did the script already include like, here's the lines and then stop, there's going to be a dance there, and then you get Bobbi and Or set the dance. So the script already included the dance beats all throughout.
Yeah, and something that Bobbi and I are kind of seeking these days, and since is a script where the dance is justified. And by justified, I mean the dance is not something suddenly outwardly, you know, something out of nowhere. And that's something that when we read the script for the first time, we were blown, because it was the first time, actually the first time where we see a feature film fully conceived and has justified dance scenes in it. It's, for us, it was mind blowing.
Yeah, either like the dance there to serve part of the storytelling, or to express something that with words couldn't happen. Yeah. You know, it was amazing to read the script from the beginning and see where Boaz had put all of the dances. It made complete sense.
It's interesting, more than one critic refers to the film as a musical, even though there's no songs, because the dance is woven into the film in the way that musicals do. One last question, then we're going to open it up. We have a lot of questions from the audience. Intentionally or not, again, critics have consistently perceived the film with phrases like the first non-binary musical, or I think the Rolling Stone was the one who said copious copulation and gender fluid and those kinds of things. Boaz, what was your goal in having a film that was both so sexually explicit and so fluid all over the place in terms of gender interactions in and out of bed?
Well, I noticed in my own life that I experienced myself in both my masculine and feminine selves whenever I'm in a relationship. And that my own discomfort with certain aspects of myself, whether it was the female being uncomfortable with the male, or how I perceived it anyway, that a lot of times when we think we're having trouble with our partner, it's because we're in disharmony with ourselves. So I really wanted to give theatrical expression to that harmony or disharmony, to that struggle. And in terms of the sexuality, I mean, it's a sex movie. And by that, I mean, it's a movie about sex. Romantic relationships are movies about sex, ultimately, or at least to a huge extent. And in this country, especially, you know, like romantic films, sexual films, you know, once in a while, they'll show you some carefully lit scene of a body moving for a second, and that's it. But our relationships are sometimes cemented or undone in the bedroom and in how we interact sexually. And that's always glossed over or left completely out of relationship movies. So to me, the dances, the dialogue, and the sex scenes were like 3 parallel paths that you were watching this relationship develop through the movie. And I mean, I've seen a couple, you know, I think that if you watch the film with some thought and some carefulness, you'll see that the sex scenes each tell a story. They're not just there to show you people copulating, although why the hell not? But each one, no, like as if that's a problem. Like, I don't care, you know. But in this particular case, each sex scene is designed to show you which aspect of which character is connecting or not connecting to the other person, which part of the person is gelling, which part of the couple isn't gelling. Like, ultimately in this film, it's the female side of the male character and the male side of the female character that have a positive sexual relationship. And it's the other side that doesn't. So, you know, when we watch action films, no one ever says, you know, oh man, why didn't you cut away during the car chase? Or why is Keanu Reeves shooting so many people in the head right now, right? That's why you're seeing that movie. But when we see films about sexuality and romance, it's like, oh, I don't know if I need to see so much. And frankly, I just wasn't interested. I wanted to make a film that opened that up and that treated sexuality as valid a thing to show on screen as anything else. It's been done before. It's not the first time. But it is rare for American films to do that.
Before we open it up, do you guys want to add anything to that? How you felt about being in a film that was so fluid and explicit about sexuality or open?
I found it refreshing.
Yeah.
I found, you know, for me, you know, dance is such a celebration of the body, and the fact that it didn't stop there and it went even more into, you know, nudity and sexuality and sensuality felt important. And I felt like it felt refreshing to be, you know, in intimate scenes that could show more than just the pretty parts, you know, like the well lit, like Boaz said, moments. So.
Or doing anything?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot. I agree with Boaz and Bobbi, and I do think that just emphasize this point that Boaz touched, that America needs more, like, it's forbidden here to have penises on screen. You know what I mean? It's like, it's about time that this thing will open up and be allowed, because it's just about time.
All right, let's take some of the questions from our viewers, our audience here, and see where they go. I'm going to try reading them a little bit more this time so you get the whole flavor of them. From Jonathan Katz says, around the middle part of the film, Orr performs an electrifying solo dance while observed by AVIVA Xena in the desert. Did that symbolize a breakthrough in connecting AVIVA's male and female aspects?
Yes.
Choreographers, dancers, director?
Absolutely.
Yes, I mean, I'm nervous to say yes or no because there's no right or wrong answer. But in choreographing it, that was a moment where we wanted, and Boaz, you had said like the marriage or they are one, you know, and they walk off, and for a minute they're walking off leaning with, you know, like they couldn't be able to support each other without leaning apart, away from each other. They wouldn't be able to walk without you know, they would fall. And then, you know, they just simply walk together side by side. That's how we interpreted it.
Yeah, and I think very, very beautifully. I mean, the choreography is like nothing you've seen in another film, I think. But to my mind, Eden, the male character, is more split and uncomfortable from the get-go with his duality. And AVIVA has her own issues with it, but she's actually a more connected person. And in fact, she starts fracturing. When I start putting the two actors in the scenes separately, is she's responding to Eden's discomfort with her in a way, and she starts to fracture in the relationship. And this dance, she basically cements her relationship with herself a lot sooner than him, and he may never. You know, but so that moment was definitely designed to show you that she's reclaiming her friendship with herself at a certain point. So.
Great. Orion asked, did you have any films that inspired you for this one, Boaz?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, honestly, in terms of the concept and wanting to make it like this, Not exactly. I mean, once I started, like there's some films that once I started, after I finished the script and started working on it as a director, that I watched. I mean, like I loved Blue is the Warmest Color as a sort of dive into frankness and that. There were a few Godard films from the 60s. There's this one called A Woman is a Woman, where people hold lights and shots and kind of the fourth wall is broken all the time. And it's kind of very colorful and theatrical in a way. It's with Belmondo. That's something I saw after I had written the script, and I went, look at him, you know. But he didn't actually have dance sequences in it because his actors couldn't dance, I think. So, but that's a film. I mean, we watch, you know. Then there's films that you just watch when they're going to do a dance film, like Bob Fosse's editing and choreography and all that jazz and films like that. I really like Lars von Trier. I think he just tries things that other people don't try. You know, so I think that his film Dogville and his Nymphomaniac film were both movies that I found really, like watching them. There's things I love about them, things I don't, but like you just sit there going, yeah, go for it. Like try that, you know, and that's something that try it and just, you know, is something that Lars von Trier sort of really helped me in terms of just feeling like I could be free. And of course, whenever doing a film about relationships, I watch scenes from a marriage like 2 times in a row or whatever. Like Bergman's films are always hugely influential whenever I do something that's more intimate and about relationships.
Great. So I might mispronounce this person's name, but Xiao Ching asks or says, I've watched the movie 4 times. So we've got some real fans here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for making this inspiring movie. I noticed when the new character is introduced, it shows the nude image of him or her. Is there any special meaning behind it? I found it really interesting.
You know, some things are just like when you're creating something, you get ideas and you're like, then you don't do them. I had this idea, right? That like in so many movies, right? Sexuality, especially male sexuality and how we feel about ourselves relates to our penis and how we feel about our penis. Do we feel comfortable, uncomfortable? Is it big, small? Do we feel good about that, bad? But it's the one thing you never see in a movie. You never know how an actor or a character's relationship to his sexuality is affecting his behavior. And I was just like, you know what? What if instead of like making it this big tease or secret, when you saw the characters, you're like, boom, this is who I am. And then boom, next thing they've got the clothes on. And 90% of the characters that you see naked never have a sex scene in the film, never are without their clothes ever again. But now you know, here they are, now you know, now let's carry on with things. And I just thought it was an interesting way of doing that, you know? And it's funny, I think in a kind of a opening up, freeing kind of a way. So I wanted to play with that.
Great. So Joe asks, says that he loved Bobbi, Jean's, and Orr's work in the film. It's electric, which comes as no surprise. But tell us about filming and choreographing the White Room sequence, which he adored.
Thank you, Joe. For the White Room, we worked a lot. It was very important for me to create a very safe environment for Isaias and Xena. And we worked a lot on different exercises, and all of it was improvised. I knew that I wanted to kind of create this physical language between them and connection. And then when they were going to shoot it, they would have something to rely on, and they would have the connection to take it wherever it needed to be taken. And so we did a lot of, covering the mirrors, turning off all the lights, the eyes closed, and we rehearsed with clothes a lot to find the sharing of weight and the trust, and then slowly moved from there.
By the way, one thing that I don't regret, because it's part of the film, but the way Bobbi worked with Isaias, who plays the male character, and Xena, because I had to edit it, the way that dance works is it's improvisational, but there's always a point of contact between the two actors, dancers. The idea is that they never don't touch one area of another. So we shot the...
Actually, like when we would rehearse it, sorry, Boaz, you just reminded me, but we would rehearse it and they would do this exercise for like 30 minutes without stopping.
Yes, and what I was going to say is, I mean, I filmed with my iPhone about a 4-minute moment in one of the rehearsals. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And some of the takes in the White Room, which lasted 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever, until they got too tired to do any more, are some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. But there's no way I could put a 10-minute uncut scene of the, so it has that, we had to find something in the editing that captured that feeling, but you'll never see how amazing some of these 10-minute sequences were between these two dancers. That they were absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, I think it was very important for us to somehow portray that listening. Like, how do we make listening physical and able to be seen? And I think they did such an incredible job of finding that zone. And what's amazing is that when you find that zone, it can last forever. And when you're watching it, it's so hypnotic and you can't take your eyes off of them. And the smallest gesture, and because when something is listened to, it becomes larger than life. And
well, Yaron has a question which is kind of meta, so I'll just say it as it is, and you guys, why don't you start, and Bobbi, was the film's style itself Gaga-like? I guess he means not the choreography, but the flow of the film.
Do you want to start? It's a good question. I mean, it's a great question, actually. There is a misconception, I think, where Gaga is a tool. Gaga is not a choreography thing. It can help you with accessing different ideas and different engines within your body, but it is not people think that to do Gaga is to do combinations of choreography. This is wrong. It's not it. So yes, of course, we use Gaga in our body on a daily basis, because that's where Bobbi and I trained. Yet, while making the choreography, the steps, the movement, this is more it's just something else. It's not a technique, if it makes sense. You want to elaborate more?
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I guess what's magical about Gaga is that it becomes something that is yours, and if the flow of the film seemed that it was Gaga-like to you, then it is. I don't know if that made sense.
Sure.
Like there's so many different levels of the steps were
yeah.
The choreography is not Gaga. We're deeply influenced by Gaga, but if the flow, but I think he's asking about the flow of the movie.
I think so.
Is it Gaga-like?
Boaz, what do you think?
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, you'll never know.
Okay, well, from the same person, the question is, why does the film start with the clarification that it's the dancers in the role of actors rather than the vice versa? Why did you want to clarify that dancers, not actors, who you cast as the leads?
I wanted to make the opening just feel. I felt like there were so many potentially confusing things about the film with the two aspects of the characters and so on, that I wanted to explain, just set up some of that so people knew what they were in for. And also, it's a movie about me in some way, or about a person, or being told by a person who is separated from his own life, and that he can only see his life through the camera, or through telling a story, or through a kind of a metaphorical look at his own life. So, you know, I think that the character's disconnection and inability to connect with AVIVA, Eden's inability to connect with AVIVA, is partially because he's always standing outside of everything and making it into a movie and explaining life to himself as he experiences it. So that was part of the setup as well.
Okay. One other question, but there's only a couple more questions, so we're not going to go too much longer, but somebody else is very enamored of the solo that you do before describing Eden's flight to LA. And they say it's their favorite part of the film, and can you talk about that? So I don't know what you want to say, you might want to add about that without giving away more plot points.
I was the most nervous about this scene because what Boaz had kind of proposed seemed almost impossible for me. I met with his father, who's just a living legend, and he helped us build kind of the structure and gave us a few tools and ideas to start to build the thing. And immediately, I'm not a mime, and I tried to do some of the things he wanted, and I couldn't, because those things take decades to perfect. And so I was like, so how do I meet these ideas, and how do I use the tools I know to take them into a new place, and how do I go further for myself with what the ideas were. And I thought a lot about it. I would just kind of go over the map a lot physically, and I would visualize it a lot in my head. And then I knew I was just gonna have to go for it. And I didn't let Boaz see it because I didn't think I could do it. But I knew that once we got in the room and the camera was rolling, I was going to go for it with every part of my soul, and hopefully that would work.
Yeah, no, I have to say that was knowing what an important moment that was, and I knew I wanted to do it in one take. That was the only thing I told Bobbi. I was like, Bobbi, we're not going to cut. You're going to do this whole thing in one take. I didn't even see a rehearsal of it. Bobbi just came on set, and I mean, I have a lot of trust in Bobbi as an incredible performer, so I knew something was going to be interesting, but I didn't know what the hell it was going to be. It's just like, fingers crossed, me and the DP were like, let's see what she does. And we had an amazing young director of photography who handled the camera. And by the way, his name is Arseny Khachaturian, a young Russian kid who is just really phenomenal. And we basically watched Bobbi give us the steps of what she was going to do, figured out where we were going to put the camera. And then she just blasted through it in like 3 or 4 takes. And one of them was just the best. And it was magical. And that's the one that you see in the movie. But to not even know what you were going to shoot that day and have Bobbi just come in looking like a crazy woman, like, okay, let's go, let's shoot it, was that was an interesting experience. But I agree. I think it's one of the most unique performance moments that I've seen in a movie in a long time, and it's all Bobbi.
Oh, but I'm also very thankful that it pushed me to those places. I mean, when I dance, I always dance with words, and I think about, I'm saying a lot of words internally, and this was the first time I was asked to actually say them in the moment. And yeah, thank you, Boaz.
Someone asked a question, well, first the praise from Kim. The choreography is beautiful and fun and absolutely tells, sometimes continuing, sometimes finishing a story. The cinematography is great and captures the movement, and the person wants to know, did the DP already have previous experience filming dance, and how much was Bobbi or involved in talking out how you're going to frame the dance when you shot it on screen?
The DP, Arseny, had shot a little bit of dance, but I mean, the dude's 25 years old. He hasn't shot a lot of anything. You know, he had some documentary experience, but he has an incredible, natural, and intelligent feeling for where the camera should be for movement and for a lot of other things. What Bobbi and I agreed on, Bobbi hasn't had experience in dancing for the choreographing for the camera, which sometimes was amazing and sometimes was terrifying, because sometimes she would put together scenes where like people were all over the room and I'd just be like, Bobbi, realize I'm gonna have to film all this shit like somehow, like, so on the one hand, it also gives the film a spontaneity in terms of what we're capturing that it might not have with someone who just knows how to do things, but it also was terrifying. The one thing Bobbi and I knew was that we didn't want the dancing to feel presentational. Like, it's a dance number. Bobbi was always very, very like driving home the point of like during the wedding dance or anything, like it's got choreography, but I want it to feel like you've just stepped into a wedding and the dance is sort of coming up in the middle of it. But you know, she was very conscious of not wanting the camera to be too presentational and too stagey and too show busy. And that was something that was very important to me too. So we both had that in mind when we were making these dance scenes together.
Great. Well, I'd like to wrap with this one wonderful comment. It's not even a question, from Deborah K. Anderson. It said, this is not a question, but I want to echo that the dance is completely justified throughout the film, just as the sex scenes are. As I'm sitting here in the middle of a Black Lives Matters protest here in Hell's Kitchen, it struck, I don't know if she's like literally on the phone, but it struck me in a profound way that what Boaz, what you've done with AVIVA, has done more for gender identity than any other film, just as Remember the Titans did more for race relations as any other film has. So I'm blown away, and kudos. I think that's a...
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And you know, I will say one more thing though, and I'll say that maybe the most important thing for me to hear from somebody, because I think that when we deal with gender, like when the word like gender fluidity is tossed around in relationship to this film and stuff, you know, people naturally associate that with, oh, it's about transgender people or about homosexual people or about, you know, and it's always for straight, cisgender, whatever those words are, that too many words right now that people are using, it's always so easy to make it about the other. It's always so easy to make it about somebody else, about the other. And for me, what was really important was exploring the movie in a way that just took away that feeling of the other and made it like we all have duality. We're all binary, whether we express it with a person of the same sex or the opposite sex, or whether we're by ourselves all the time. Like, this duality is within all of us, and we're always trying to find that balance. And once we accept that the duality is part of us, we no longer look at other people as the other anymore. You know, it's like, once you're like, I am that person too, whether I'm attracted to women or men or whatever, I'm still dealing with duality. That means everyone who's dealing with duality, which is everyone, is part of me. And that was just really, really important for me to get across, you know, and to sort of, that's the line I wanted to blur, was the line between us and other people, or me and somebody else. So the fact that you would say that is just hugely gratifying. I very much appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for coming and enjoying this talk. And if you haven't seen the film, outside of pictures.us, tell your friends about the film if you liked it. And we'll let you all go now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.